Hey folks, this is Chris, the spiritual artist, and I want to give you a tip here for some texture making that's really simple, but that you should be aware of. And so I was working on this and I thought I'm going to stop and record this for my folks. I am doing the base coat for abstracts right now. And what you want to do is you want to build some story on the board. I've talked about how to use asemic writing. I've talked about how to use a drag technique and scribble on the page, but this is much more simple. What you want to do is you want to be aware of the different viscosities of the paints you're using. So some paints are thick and some are thin, and you should be aware of those. Start paying attention. This is all about being present to what you're doing. Start paying attention, and you realize that because they are of such different textures, that when you mix them together at the same time, the flat paint will go below and the more heavy paint will stay to the top. So the more fluid the paint, like golden high flows, they are great to use real quick undercoating. Just put down a quick layer of fluorescent green is what I did here. And then I did something interesting. You know, I love using a brayer. And so I took a brayer and I took house paint. I know some of you are against house paint, but when you look at history, house paint has been used on a lot of large works. And that is when I started using it on my larger pieces, and now I realize it's okay for me to use it on my small pieces. What's so wonderful about house paint is it has a chemical component in it that slows the drying time, so it's more loose and yet thick. They want it to be thick because they want it to cover up what's below it. Think about it. When you build a house paint, you want to claim that it only takes one coat to do your walls. Well, we know that doesn't usually work, but to do that, they have made the paint thick and kind of sit on top. And as you can see, what I just did here is I put down a quick layer of this fluorescent green. I'm falling in love with fluorescence. And I put it down first, and then on top of it, I did a swipe with the brayer of my heavy house paint. And you can see it's making this wonderful, wonderful texture effect. Now that is a good story behind what's going on. Here I used a fluorescent pink. I will share that with you, fluorescent pink. And underneath it, and on top of it, I used a different product. Where is that can? Believe it or not, I used Liquitex Soft Body. And so Liquitex is also, as you can see, a thicker paint that sits on top and gives you these wonderful shapes. This is all how you start an abstract, because it gives you story to work with. You can choose to isolate shapes in here to draw something that's very literal, or you can do something very abstracted with it. But it's giving you the bones of a good painting. It's giving you a structure to start with. That's why in the beginning, don't worry about being perfect. In fact, just let yourself throw the paint on. When you throw the paint on, you will get random errors. When you drag a brush, you can see here, maybe there's a little black like roller coaster line, which is great, something I can work with. That gives you something to grab onto. It gives you tooth, too. It also gives you tooth. So as you can see here, it's a very simple process of applying different heavy weights of your paint. So once again, I'm going to repeat that. Be aware of the different viscosity of your paint. Is it heavy? Is it clumpy? Is it runny? Is it loose? And I'm going to tell you one other trick I love to use, and it's a little tricky because it's like working with watercolor, so be careful. I like to use watercolor ink, India ink, oftentimes in the base. And the reason I use India ink, in fact, I'm going to do that what the heck right now so you can see. India ink is very thin. It's very thin. And so, as you can see, I'm just going to dribble some ink on here. Very loose. And then I take my brayer. I'm going to leave the junk on there because that might make it interesting. And see, when I drag across it, I get all kinds of weird shapes. Now, you want to remember, building is always adding and subtracting. And so here there's too much black. So I'm going to take a cloth and pick up a little bit. You see what I did? I picked up a little bit of the ink. In fact, as you can see, it's a lot of ink. I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to pick up in different areas. So one more tip for this short little video is to use different cloths. There's different texture abilities that you can apply. I have recently started experimenting with burlap. This is a very loose burlap. but when I lay it down and run it over, it absorbs some of that India ink, and it also moves and gives me some nice texturing effects because it lets the paint move around. I'm going to show you in a minute what I'm doing here. Okay, here we go. Do you see the edges? These edges were formed by that burlap. It picked up and pulled off. Now in this case, I have found out that the India ink is almost a little too runny for the burlap to work. It might work better with that house paint. But it did pick up and give me some history in there. You can see these shadows to start with. So play around with cloths and play around with adding and subtracting. You can use Kleenex, you can use old house towels, you can use rags, you can use burlap, and when you roll on top, it will give you different textures. Hey, one little note. If you like this video and you want more of it, then follow me. You have to go up there and choose that little bell, follow me and say, I want notifications. And when new YouTube videos come out, and I try to do them on a regular weekly basis, you'll get one. These include interviews of artists around the world from multiple disciplines, and also some techniques and tips like this. Talk to you soon. Follow the Spiritual Artist Podcast. I just thought of something and I wanted to insert that into this video. If you use India ink, I want you to be aware it comes with a warning. Because it's water-based, it picks up very easily into your other paints. And so as you go and proceed on your drawing, you will pick up some of that ink if it's not totally dry. Now you can use a spray-on sealant, or you can use a matte glaze of some sort. Here's a matte golden glaze that you can put on there that will actually keep it in place once it's dry, but use it with caution. India ink. So there you have it. 3 different ways to put a base texture in your painting. First, be aware of the viscosity of what materials you're using. If you're using a flow as opposed to a heavy body, and use them in the right manner. Use the flow underneath and build up onto it with a heavy body. So that's one way. And of course, I want you to use brayers. I think they're great ways for abstract artists to get a base down. Actually, any artist to get a base down. Second way is be aware of the material. What you put down can come back very quickly when it's wet. So I want you to use a towel, a cloth, Kleenex, burlap. Use it to put down when something's wet, roll over it, same brayer, and pick it back up, and you'll get stories coming through of history that's revealed by picking back up off of the painting, okay? Third way is to experiment, if you're brave, with watercolor ink, India ink. It's dark, it has a beautiful color, it spreads out. If you add a little bit of water, it will get a nice warm brown tone to it. I love using it, but beware, it's tricky and it can mix into your painting as you go on further if you don't coat it and seal it. So what I'd like you to do is, in the comments section, I want you to share your favorite texture making technique with us. What is your favorite texture making technique? And I'll tell you what, at the end of September, I will award the best idea with a copy of my book and a small print of one of my paintings. So whoever posts the best idea for how to make a texture, how to start building the story in your painting, will win that award. I hope you try, write it down. Let's see what we have. Let's see all the ideas that we can bring together and share with this art community. Talk to you soon, and thank you for following the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Okay, so I wanted to share one quick tip with you. People ask me, where do you find your colors? Where do they come up with your color palettes? And I want to show you something because I'm working further on this one that we did a little earlier. And I find my colors, I'm told what to paint. There's a red that was on the brush. If you remember, I used a hot pink, and it made this burnt umber kind of color in the background. And as I'm painting, the painting talks to me and it's telling me what it wants to be. And it's saying, hey, this color works. I can see it and I can feel it. And so intuitively, I know I'm gonna add more of that brown ochre color. Here's one of my brands that I love a lot, this Holbein acrylic colors. This is red ochre, and it's going to go really well with this palette that I'm starting. So I want you to start listening not only to the viscosity of your paint, but I want you to listen to the painting itself and what it's telling you it wants to be. What colors does it want to be? And are you listening? Talk to you soon.